Jewish issue is like a unique hatred.
Jewish is not a race.
There has to be something why this hatred continues.
And we see a huge rise in anti-Semitism again.
It's a hard question because it's irrational.
What does it mean for you to be Jewish?
27 years of dealing with racism or anti-Semitism, it's exhausting.
He's a Jamaican Jew.
You know, how are we responsible for this attitude?
Tyler Samuels, please join us.
The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality?
So here's the funny thing. Everyone thinks that I actually grew up there. I wasn't born in Jamaica. I was born in Canada.
Okay, so you're more Canadian.
I wouldn't push it that far. I wouldn't push it that far.
You're a citizen of the world.
Yeah, there we go. I am a citizen of the world, basically now. So, yeah.
I read this book recently. I have this thing about the lost tribes of Israel, and I read a book by Simon Wiesenthal called "Sails of Hope." He tries to paint this picture using all this historical document, all this data he could find and documents he could find about the origin of Christopher Columbus, but as a Jew. But at some point, you probably heard this already, but that Columbus's family had some debt owed to them by the King of Spain, and they gave Jamaica to Columbus's descendants, and these secret Jews kind of ruled Jamaica for a couple hundred years, and let the Jews, and while the Jews weren't allowed to live in Spain and Portugal anymore, they had religious freedom in Jamaica, and there was a big influx from Spain and Portugal. I'm sure you probably know all about that.
With that, there are some points of that is correct, but there are other points where it's not correct. This myth that Christopher Columbus had Jewish ancestry, sorry, but for the people who weirdly want to claim this man as part of the Jewish community, I really don't want to have a murderer as part of my nation, but whatever. But
we do anyway, but okay.
But with Jews in Jamaica, yeah. So what happened was the island became a personal colony to the Columbus family. And so what happened was a lot of Jews, a lot of conversos, they went to Jamaica. They settled there. Obviously, they couldn't openly practice Judaism, but there was tolerance. I wouldn't call it acceptance, but tolerance for it. But that quickly shifted because one of Columbus's descendants, I think it's a grandson, or actually a son, he was either mentally unfit for the role of governor of the island. And so what happened was the non-Jewish Spanish that were on the island, they never liked the Columbus family. So what they did was they sent several letters and reports saying, oh, these heretic Portuguese, they're spreading all over the island. And they called Jews Portuguese during that time period. And so what happened was the Catholic Church in the Caribbean, the Archbishop took over direct religious control of the church in Jamaica, and they brought in the Inquisition. And so they started deporting suspected Portuguese. And eventually what had to happen, a lot of Jews sent letters to the British. The British
came and helped them, right?
Yeah. But not to secure religious freedom, but because the Jews were kind of deceptive and said there were gold mines in Jamaica. So come, invade, you'll have control of the gold mines. And so that's what the British did.
Did you experience, do you know about, is there anti-Semitism in Jamaica?
There has been a few incidences of anti-Semitism there. But the difference that that isn't anywhere else, the government came out quickly against it. They condemned it. They investigated it.
You mean the
And
modern?
yeah, yeah, modern Jamaica, they've cracked down on anti-Semitism really well, and people seem to forget um, the Caribbean dynamics between race and religion completely different than in North America. In Jamaica, everyone is Jamaican. There's no, yeah, there's black Jamaicans, white Jamaicans, Jewish Jamaicans, Syrian, Lebanese Jamaicans, what have you. But at the end of the day, they're all Jamaican. There's no, we're breaking off into subsections here, and I'm this and you're no. Everyone's Jamaican, and that's how it rolls on that island.
That's
Historically,
nice. That's a
yeah,
nice
there was,
model. Yeah.
yeah, historically there was a lot of anti-Semitism, but that has to do with British colonialism rather than Jamaican independence.
So I want to ask you about this growing up. Did you? I mean, what does it mean? Let's circumvent everything else. What does it mean for you to be Jewish? Because if you ask Jews this question, ask two Jews, you get three answers. So, what does it mean for you to be Jewish? I'm curious.
For me, it has everything to do with being part of a nation, a religion, and how that intersects with my life. For me, my Judaism looks very different from a lot of people's, especially online, where they get into these pointless arguments about, oh, this Jewish denomination did this, and this is why they're not Jewish. Who cares, honestly? As long as they do what they need to do within the terms of Jewish law, that's their business. But for me, my Judaism is really, if you're not out to harm the Jewish people as a Jew, then you and I can have a dialogue. You and I can communicate, and we can share something.
What's the difference for you between when you see, for example, racism or like a white black thing versus like a Jew non-Jew thing, like an anti-Semitism kind of thing in your like being? Is there some difference when you experience, for example, racism versus anti-Semitism, or is it kind of have the same feeling? That's like an interesting perspective that you have. That
It's the same thing.
it
The
feels
same thing.
the same.
Yeah, because when I deal with anti-Semites, they always bring up the color of my skin when they're attacking my Judaism. Oh, you couldn't be possibly Jewish. You're not from the Levantine because blacks aren't from there. All sorts of nonsense. Asking for my DNA like the Nazis, checking how pure my blood is from the Middle East and all sorts of nonsense. But then when I deal with racists within the Jewish community, it's the same thing. They bring up my color. So
Do both camps have similar tactics of dealing with the problem? Are you basically dealing with, you're basically on two soccer teams, and on Mondays and Wednesdays you play for these guys, and Tuesdays and Thursdays you play for these guys, and it's the same skill set? Or is it a different, a different, because the interesting thing about slavery is like whites enslaved whites, blacks enslaved blacks, like Chinese enslaved Chinese. Like there's like slavery has existed forever, everywhere, in every country, and also it mixed as well. But
I hear it's making
like,
a comeback, by the way.
it's making a comeback.
State of the world and all that.
But I'm wondering, like, what's the difference between like a feeling of hostility between races and a feeling of it between Jew and anti-Semite? Like, what your experience of the community and how they manage the problem, feel about the problem?
I think before, just as you gear up to answer this, I think what's sort of on top of that, there's really the question, age-old question. Being Jews, Jewish is not a race, right? So maybe when you answer it in those terms, we're curious, because a lot of times people, I think, just adding to Seth's question, because a lot of times people, they tend to bundle up things and say, oh, well, hate is hate. There's no difference. If you don't accept someone, then it doesn't matter who is he, who are you, what's happening. It's just general intolerance, general ignorance, general, bigotry, envy, all of that. And we have to somehow work with that. And we'll get to what we need to do with it. Versus, no, there's different, just like there's different flavors in everything, that we eat. There's also different types of attitudes and relationships between people, and the attitudes of people, of the nations of the world towards the Jews, is decidedly different than the general friction that exists between races. Let's put it this way. So just to give it a big, boring, kind of umbrella. Now answer your question.
I guess, well, from how I see it,
of course, for you,
I would say that if we're talking about Black people and Jewish people and how they interconnect and how they deal with one another, there is historic problems with that relationship, and there are historic highs. And I feel that with the Black-Jewish relationship, it's not like, there's just running streams of anti-Semitism within the Black community, is how a lot of Jews online like to portray all the time and bring up Louis Farrakhan, yada, yada, yada. But there is historic problems, like for a lot of Black people, especially in New York, the landlord for them was a Jew. And for them...
Who didn't look like you.
Exactly, who didn't look like me. And for them, for those Black people...
Should have been a Jew who looked like you. We could have solved the problem.
Yeah. If it was a thing, if the apartment wasn't good, if it wasn't up to their standards, they blame the landlord. And the landlord is a Jew, they're going to blame, then this must be representative of all Jews. So it's those local things that I have heard from non-Jewish Black people who, like, their hatred, for me, it doesn't make sense. Obviously, I don't understand it, but I can try to, that their issues with Jews much more personal than this international conspiracy of hate, Jews control the world, media, all that. No, it's much more personified within the neighborhoods that Jews and Black people historically live next to each other.
So we have this kind of premise that we got to from going through that book that I was talking about, The Jewish Choice, Unity or Antisemitism, which took us, I don't know, the first 20 whatever
show it, because we haven't showed it enough.
The first 20 or so episodes of our podcast. 22 episodes of our podcast to go through that the Jewish nation is a group of people made up of all of the nations of the world. Like when Abraham gathered all those people in Babylon and formed that nation, there were people there from the 70 nations. So our concept, our premise, our hypothesis, and what we're interested in doing is bringing together this group of Jews, quote unquote Jews, these people, whoever they were from, and they joined this community throughout the thousands of years. And within what would happen if you got them all in the same room, you would have a room full of people who looked black, white, yellow, red, fat, skinny, gay, straight, you basically have a tiny hologram. Is that you'd have like a small microcosm of all of humanity. And so that's our premise, basically, is that this Jewish issue is like a unique hatred and a unique situation that we're presented with, and might be easier. I mean, maybe more difficult, but easier than something else, because it's such a small group of people. And is it possible that we as Jews, and I'd like to now ask you the next question, is it possible that we as Jews could find a could find some unity between us despite all our differences? And I've seen, for example, this woman Candace Owens, who's like a very right wing. You probably know her, right? She's like a super like right wing black woman, and you have like super woke left, like Black Lives Matter black people. So you could say they're also, in the black community, you have very, very different opinions. But I'm interested in just specifically just drilling into this issue about the Jewish problem that we're facing, the Jewish problem. That do you see among Jews, when you're having dialogue with Jews on the right and on the left, and when you're having dialogue of Jews of different color, do you see the ability, the willingness, the hope that Jews would be able to find some kind of unity together?
Not on anti-Semitism, but on other things, yes. I have discussions with, like you said, with Jews of color, Black Jews, what have you. And there's nothing that unites them, at least when it comes to actually dealing with anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism will unite them when it's happening. So the hostage crisis in that synagogue in Texas, that united us. But when it comes to how do we deal with protecting ourselves, for example, you will find no unity in that question. Because I wrote an article about this, saying that as a Black Jew, I don't like the police, but I'd rather them there at the synagogue protecting me than just someone could walk in with a gun and shoot us all. And let me tell you, it was actually not the Black Jews who were vocally upset and criticizing me. Oh, how could Tyler say this as a Black man and a Jew? How can he support the police in this matter? No, it was actually left-wing, non-Black Jews who were getting very upset by this. This is not the way to move
Left-wing
forward.
non-black Jews means white liberal Jews.
In the American
context.
Okay. All right. Yeah, in the American
you brought it to me from the other side. I wasn't sure what you're saying.
I don't want to get in trouble with some of
left-wing non-black Jews.
If you're a Jew, you're in trouble already. So don't try to. I want to take a step back, because I think we're jumping kind of. It's good, but I want to ask if for you, from your experience, having gone through college and experienced clearly what can be described as anti-Semitism, plus other flavors of intolerance and hate. What do you think is the root of anti-Semitism? Because that's a question we like to ask everyone who we speak to. And by the way, I asked this. We also had conversations with anti-Semites, like declared anti-Semites, neo-Nazis, all kinds. Like, we speak to everyone, and very interesting. And people have, some of them have very clear answers. Some have very ambiguous answers. So I'm curious for you, first of all, what do you think is the root of anti-Semitism? And you can speak about today. You don't have to go 3,000 years into the past, because we know it has gone through phases and all that. So keep it easy for you, for all us.
I would say it's just an easy form of hatred to get into. A lot of people have told me, oh, anti-Semitism is due to ignorance and lack of education. But then I see people with degrees online saying the most vile, horrible things about Jews. True. So for me, it has nothing to do with education. But I do think it has a lot to do with how easy it is to get into, how available all these resources of hate is open to this community. And I also feel that because there isn't pushback against it, as I guess as Jews we would want to see, that it's easy for those who are anti-Semitic to continue doing it, and then getting more people involved.
Okay. So this is like really like right now at this point in time.
Yeah,
Go back 50 years, 100 years. Well, why is there, what is the root of anti-Semitism? I mean, go, you know what? I retract what I said earlier. Go back to any period in the history. Why is there anti-Semitism? Why does it persist? You would think that a generation dies off and then a fresh new generation comes about. They don't have the internet in the Middle Ages. Why would they still have anti-Semitism? Why would they still have this ingrained form of hatred towards one group of people, which is not even so easily identifiable? I mean, at the time, yeah, they had different clothing, and that's in the Middle Ages, but throughout history, you couldn't always tell who's a Jew and who's not a Jew. People would have that attitude. Why do you think that is?
It's a hard question because it's irrational. So for me, but how I see it, I guess through history, I would argue that any minority is going to get hatred, especially a minority that can't protect itself in every instance, whether it's they just can't or if they're legally restricted from protecting themselves, which in a lot of European nations at the time, back then, that was the outcome for Jews. We couldn't defend ourselves. We were legally put into, whether it's jobs or ghettos or whatever, legally, we weren't even citizens. So it's quite easy for anti-Semitism, whether one generation dies out, you still have the Jews there. No one is protecting them. So you know what, I'm going to go abuse them. And then you see how it continues to work. But that's just from the historic side of it.
So you're saying it's simply it was easy, basically.
Yeah, it was very easy.
So people need some sort of an outlet. People need a scapegoat. People need to hate someone.
Well, yeah, and we see that with the plague, with the Black Death. They were killing Jews because they thought Jews were causing the plague, spreading it. And there were several pogroms targeting Jews because of that. So anything to target a minority that has no citizenship, has no rights, easy for them to attack and easy for anti-Semitism to spread.
Okay, that's I have to say it's a very practical answer. I don't think we heard that one before. Hey, it was easy. It was just there. They're just standing there. They look like they could, they're not training that much. So no, okay, I'll give you that. It's a valid answer for sure. I guess the follow-up question is, how come this minority did not disappear? Because other minorities did disappear. There are a lot of different groups who didn't, end up with their own independent state and did not end up so, well integrated in the societies that hosted them. This group is a little different. Like you'd expect that after, a few hundred years, 1,000 years, maybe two, let's just be gone. But it's not the case. So that also begs a question. Why do you think that is?
Well, I would simply say survival. If you're being oppressed for hundreds of years, having to deal with second-class citizenship, having to deal with violence occurring against you and your community, essentially at will, anytime you could die for just being Jewish. Survival, fighting, and I feel that has given us a tough skin because I also relate it to the Black experience when slaves came over to North America. They didn't just assimilate. They didn't just, well, they couldn't assimilate anyways, but they didn't give up their idea of what they were. and you can apply that to Jews in the diaspora in places where, like Russia, for example, it wasn't easy being a Jew in Tsarist Russia, but they still continued their traditions.
Well, that's a good question, because we thought we have an episode just on that. We have a couple actually about that time period, and you see that the Jews were in the ghetto. They were together, sort of. Yeah, there were the occasional pogrom, but relatively unscathed, relatively, compared to all the other stuff around them. Then the Tsar actually opens the gate and says, "Hey, come join us. Come to the universities, integrate into society." So, as usual, half the Jews join, the other half, objects that. No, we should stay looking different, having our own tradition, our own values, everything, our culture intact. The other half is like, no, we're going to go and assimilate. They go and assimilate. Quickly, they find themselves on the far left. They find themselves somehow involved with the killing of the Tsar, somehow involved with the revolution, eventually with their back against the wall. Eventually, this leads to other things like the start of Zionism. My point is that it doesn't follow the usual trajectory. Like you'd expect, as you said, if we're weak and we're being picked on and it's easy, then you'd expect one of two things. Either, we disappear, or we do some maneuvering that would allow us to avoid it, right? Like with assimilate, for example, shed off all the external characteristics, because we can look like many different types of people, right? There's like whites, blacks, all kinds. So just like, take off the weird looking clothes and just join society. And yet you see that even that is not necessarily possible. Like the reaction from the society where Jews try to assimilate is even sometimes worse than when the Jews try to keep to themselves. How do you explain that?
Well, for one, I would argue that people saw us as weak, but in reality, we're strong people. I think that's one difference. And for assimilation, I think people have a very convoluted way for the belief in this term. Assimilation to survive is different than assimilation to get ahead. And I guess it depends on which Jewish community that is a part of, but assimilation to survive, I would say, is also another way to survive and not disappear. You can join a majority culture and still hold your traditional beliefs. That's modern orthodoxy for you. But I would counter by saying that assimilation and how Jews use it to survive, how Jews used it to their own benefit, and it backfired towards them. I think that's the reality of being an oppressed minority trying to survive, trying to figure out your way in a society that doesn't want you. And I think that needs to be made clear, especially. No society, regardless of how modern they were historically, ever wanted us.
We would argue more than that. We'd argue that it's always the most advanced societies where you'd expect the most openness and tolerance. That's where you get the most severe reaction against the Jew. Always throughout history, there's always the top, and the Jews were also incorporated into the top levels of those societies throughout
Babylon, Egypt, Rome, Greece, Persia, Spain, Germany, now America. There's one piece that to me feels missing, and that's this kind of eternal piece. This, like, is there some magic to this whole thing? Is there some huge goal that's just beyond our regular day-to-day existence, but is there some bigger plan for humanity than just a bunch of different groups hating on each other until they figure out how to stop hating on each other?
I like this. This is a good direction. Yes. What's the meaning of it all, Tyler? Well, yeah, we can
I would hope there's some big mystery box that you open and, oh, we solved it. We now know we can get along and what have you. I would love that. But I guess from my perspective, I would argue it's a test. It's a test to see the people who are able to live openly with whatever religions and races and peoples versus the people who refuse to do that even now. Um, I'm I'm not as religious as most people, but I do believe that in some way and somehow this is a test of our humanity. Um, for me, I see it rationally. Like I can't understand how you see the Holocaust and you see all that. Oh, and you're still an anti-Semite. You see slavery. You see how indecent and horrible it was for Black people. You're still a racist. So, but it just doesn't make sense to me. But I think in the grander scheme of things, there has to be a purpose for this. There has to be something why this hatred continues
Well,
and
what
we
drives
can't
you to
get
solve
along.
this? What's inside of you that's driving you to want to deal with this? Because most
Anger,
people,
anger. I'm tired of it. I'm 27 now, and 27 years of dealing with racism or anti-Semitism, it's exhausting. At this point, I want a solution to end it.
So,
Honestly.
okay, so I want to turn the tables a little bit, because I listened to one of the talks you had on another podcast. I'm not gonna name it, um, not just because I don't want to be misconstrued somehow, but I did hear in that conversation that you're saying that it's never the fault of the victim of the hate, right? To say if someone has been wronged, then it's the fault, it's the blame of the person who wronged them, not the person who was wrong, right? Like there's no question there. Like whenever there's some conflict, oh, he hit me, okay, so the hitter is the problem, the one who got hit is the. We come from a slightly different school of thought. We're in a closed system. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And especially when you say for 27 years, you're looking at things, you're experiencing this hate, people are not changing their attitude. They're not changing their mind. They're not changing their hearts, even in the face of compelling evidence, right? To the contrary, Holocaust, this, slavery, genocide, all those things, they're going on. So we're asking, forget about them. Let's say them, this big wall of people, they're not going to change. They're part of the natural system of nature. They're not going to change. What am I doing in all of this?
I would say even like this: if there's people who are starving, there's nothing you're going to do to hold them back. They're going to come after you to get their food. But if everybody has food and everyone's calm, so then they don't need to attack you. So that's kind of this thing. Like, what do we do? Not once the Holocaust already begins, no, but what do we do before it begins? How are we responsible for this attitude?
What do people want? Why do they hate? What can we change about our being, maybe, that would help all that hate in the world? Because clearly, as you said, the facts are there. Google is there. There's no question of people are educated. It's not a question of knowledge. It's not a question of something else is at work here. So what? Maybe if we couldn't change them, what could we change about ourselves? It's a wild question. Nobody likes to talk about it. We don't
I
like
would
it, right?
argue, yeah, people, yeah, I can see why. I can see. Uh, I would argue, nothing. There's nothing humanely possible that you could change about Jews or any other minority that would stop hatred.
So let's all hold hands and just jump off the bridge. What are we doing then? I mean,
Yeah.
what are we wasting our time if there's no solution to this?
Because life is central to Judaism. Being able to live your life, whether it's good or bad. That's a core tenet, at least for me. With this hatred of anti-Semitism, if you could become a Sabra and immigrate to America and, get all these Jews thinking like a Sabra, Israeli Sabra thinks, there'll still be anti-Semitism. There'll still be hatred. There'll still be attacks against Jews. We see it in Israel all the time. There's nothing.
But in Israel, there's also there's no unity among Jews in Israel.
Yeah, I would say even if you had unity, like yes, unity is a good thing. Even if you had it, you're still going to see that anti-Semitism. You're still going to see that violence. But with unity, Jews could effectively work to deal with it, defend against it, and fight it. That's the only key difference with unity and disunity. But I would argue if we change something about ourselves, if we did this or we did that, we try to do something, at least something that would help us. It would still exist. Anti-Semitism would still exist.
Hold on. Question. So Seth gave this metaphor of a hungry mob, and they want their food, and maybe you have some food to give, and you're not giving them, so they're gonna storm your grounds and just get their food. Is there something maybe that the world wants from Jews that we're not giving them?
Well, they've stolen a lot from us for centuries, so I don't know what else they want from us.
Okay, let me rephrase it. Is there something the world wants from Jews that they cannot forcefully take, but that we have to give? Let's think about it.
The only thing I could say with that or answer with that question is how proud we could be and can be. But would we give that up? No. But I think that's one of the things they would want from us, but not to benefit them, but to lessen us by taking it away. Because that's when you take away pride, or being proud of your identity, that's the first step to make that community weak.
Right, but you're right. But when I'm not talking about this, it's more like the metaphor. We just read this the other day.
Yeah.
It's like when you have a candle and you light another candle, your candle doesn't lose anything by lighting another candle, right? So what is that thing that we can give that wouldn't diminish us? Not like taking our pride away or our right to exist or to do all those things that we're doing. And I'm asking this, I kind of have an answer, but I'm also asking this naively because, as you said, Jews have given so much has been taken from them. We have Israel, the startup nation. Every big invention is like, there's a Jew behind it, and yet the world is not satisfied. So what is it? What is that thing, that bit of light at the tip of our candle that we can give to others that we're not giving, which is not Waze and not, Google or something else like that? What is it? And I will read a quote soon. I'm looking for it, but maybe think about it. I don't know.
I see. I don't see it in that way. I don't see something that we give to them that they need.
I'm asking. I'm asking to. I'm sorry to stop you, but I'm really like trying to think like a parent. Like you have a child, and he's like he's angry. He's hitting. He's abusive, and you can build a wall. You can send him to his room, but you really want to help him out. He needs something. What can you give him? If let's say the condition is you cannot send them away. You have to. It's your kid. You have to deal with it. It's part of you. I'm going really deep on purpose because I want to cut through politics, through things, because And excuse my impatience, but just as you've been impatient for 27 years, I've been impatient for 47 years. Okay, I'm more impatient than you, and I've seen what Jews have been trying to do, trying to assimilate, trying to give the world this or that, or sue those who go against us, or admonish those, or ban those, or ignore this, or do it. Like, none of it works. So I'm trying to get to some. We're trying to get to some radical solution here, a radical way of looking at the problem and at the solution. And that's why
and what is it that they want from us in there?
Well, I would simply say, here's the difference. I don't think they want anything from us, and that's my belief. I don't think they want anything from us, but to simply hate. I don't think, even with a parent, even if we use these metaphors, a parent soothing a child who's fighting, you soothe them. But are we gonna, as an anti-Semite, gonna soothe a Jew? Are we gonna soothe an anti-Semite?
I have an issue of ants in my kitchen, and I can try and they come at a certain season of every year. And the issue is that I can try and keep killing the ants, but if I can get the kids to cooperate and not leave sugar out on the counter, the ants don't come in. We don't have any ants at all. If you leave a cookie on the counter, if you leave a cup of juice on the counter, then we have the ants. So actually, you broke my brain for a minute because I had a different opinion than you. But when you say that they don't, there is not a thing they don't know, they just hate. It feels to me like the ant situation. It's like, if we're keeping everything going good, then there is no reason to hate. But the hate will just come naturally. They don't even know why it comes. But if we leave that opportunity open, the ants invade. The hatred comes without any reason. So I guess maybe what follows from there is, how do we keep the sugar off the counter? What is it that we need to do to keep the, if that hatred comes without any reason, it's unfounded, just hatred that comes, then how do you combat?
No, it makes no sense. Nature is not irrational. We don't see things, we don't see the reasons for things, and we say they're irrational. Like you say, oh, it's I walked in the jungle and then this coconut fell on my head. It's a coincidence. No, it's it's a series of events that led you to that point, and that coconut to that point, right? You don't see all the connections. For you, it's a coincidence. And I think, and I feel like we're pouncing on you. We're not trying to change your mind. It's
Give us the answer, Tyler.
Yeah. We're trying. No, we're trying to tease out a different kind of conversation. And look, I promised some quotes, so I opened up some quotes here, and that are really good. So King Solomon says, "Hate stirs up strife, and love will cover all crimes." Hate stirs up strife, and love will cover all crimes. I would say, even if I only looked at that, or just this line, right? Are we Jews full of love to each other or hate? I would say hate. That's the source of all the strife right there. End of story, period. Forget about the rest of the world. Let's fix that, because we haven't done it in all this millennia. In fact, there was only one period in Jewish history, a few hundred years, that we were in love during in the temple. That was the one time we're together. Everybody looked up to us. Everybody was like, oh, wanted to be us. Men want to be, how does the saying go? Men want to be him, girls want to marry him, right? That kind of thing. That was that time. Since that time, it's just been downhill ever since. We haven't been able to restore that unity. So that's just, one thing. And then this guy says, where is that? A disciple of Rabbi Nachman, he says, vitality is mainly through unity, by all the changes being included in the source of the unity. For this reason, love your neighbor as yourself is the great rule of the Torah, to include in unity and peace. The vitality, sustenance, and correction of the whole of creation are mainly by people of different views becoming included together in love, unity, and peace. And look at this. It's beautiful, right?
Beautiful, but hard to practice.
Hard to practice. Oh, there you go. And then, so that's how Seth and I started. And then we found non-Jews who were talking about, in fact, Here's one of your educated kind. So Ford says, who wrote a book, The World's Foremost Problem, the book. So in this book where he trashes the Jews, he also says the whole prophetic purpose with reference to the people of Israel seems to have been the moral enlightenment of the world through its agency. Why maybe there's a problem there. Maybe we're not being this moral reformers.
So hold on, just to be clear. Hold on, just because it's not clear if you're not familiar with what he wrote there. So, Henry, for any of our listeners who are listening, Henry Ford wrote a book called "The International Jew: The World's Foremost Problem." So he was definitely an anti-Semite, and he wrote a book about it. And he had the Dearborn Press. Also, he had a whole newspaper about it. But it also turns out that this huge, we have like our category A anti-Semites. That one of our best ones, like our best category A anti-Semites, which is also, we see this with most of our category A anti-Semites, they also wrote these incredible things about the Jewish people. Like these people have some kind of role. So now, Leo, with that context, can you read that quote again?
Oh, I'll read two quotes from him. One is the whole prophetic purpose with reference to the people of Israel seems to have been the moral enlightenment of the world through its agency. And in another place, he writes, modern reformers who are constructing model social systems on paper would do well to look into the social system under which the early Jews were organized. Okay, so that's Henry Ford. Another guy from a Russian guy, I'm not going to read the same quote we read last week, but he wrote, Jews have become, he was a member of the Russian parliament. He wrote, Jews in the 20th century have become very smart, effective, and vigorous, exploiting other people's ideas. However, this is not an occupation for teachers and prophets, not the role of guides of the blind, not the role of carriers of the lame. So even anti-Semites who write against Jews seem to have a sort of a picture that they ascribe to Jews that we don't maybe live up to.
I would say, there, when we're talking about anti-Semitism, especially, we also have to take into consideration there are different forms of anti-Semitism. There is the "I hate you" kind, and "I want to kill you."
Right.
But there's also a form of anti-Semitism where they hate us, but they want to be us. It's a type of jealousy, or I would say it's a jealous behavior, because we see this even today. We see this form of anti-Semitism is even.
So can't we just let everyone be a Jew? Can't we just all be Jews and get along?
Well, if it was that easy, I know quite a few former friends, that should have joined the Jewish people a long time ago. But I think even if we subtract the anti-Semitism, brought people to Judaism, wonderful world it would be. No, there'll still be disunity. There'll still be arguing. There'll still be problems. There'll still be.
Oh, you can't help arguments and problems, because look at the forest, look at nature. The creatures are always balancing each other, so the natural system will always have issues. But can we have unity? Can we cover the problems with, like in a family?
I would hope, I would wish, I want that. I want to see that happening. But at least within North America, I think, not to call anyone out, but I think the issue that we're here at now is, I would argue, it's not the unity of the Jewish people that is needed to combat anti-Semitism at this very moment in history. It's the unity of Jewish organizations that have the influence, the resources, and the manpower to do something. But because of egos and the utter contempt that some of these organizations have for one another, that is what is
you're taking my breath
greatest
away.
flaw. Well, it's the greatest flaw that we have as a community, when our organizations cannot even come to a table and say, you know what, There are kids in university right now who are dealing with horrible forms of anti-Semitism. We need to help them. We need to give them resources. We need to teach them to be proud Jews and not let people who support BDS to harass them. But instead of doing that, they refuse to do that, and they argue among themselves. And then they come at the end of the day, pat themselves on the shoulder and say, "Oh, nice job, Chaim. You did a great job raising those fundraising numbers, and we've done our job.
Right.
Congrats."
Oh,
But
making me feel sick.
And you and you're a student of history, so you remember, if you just rewind 150 years ago, the Hasidim versus the Maskilim in Europe, right? You're saying the organizations. I have quotes here again. The guy says, the Maskilim. A Hasidic says, in the eyes of the Maskilim, Hasidism not only embodied the evil of irrationality, but also inhibited progress. They did all they could do to convince the authorities in Russia, Austria, the autonomous region of Poland, that the spread of Hasidism should be halted because it posed political danger and even the threat of rebellion against the kingdom. That's what the Maskilim did. And the Hasidim said, a maskil said, all my acquaintances have distanced themselves from me. I cannot come to their homes, nor they to mine, for fear of their parents. If I should come to the house of prayer, I am regarded as one of God's accursed. No one greets me, nor am I allowed to join a minyan of 10 for prayer. When I walk in the town streets, I'm surrounded by a flock of boys yelling at me, heretic, apostate. So this is two sides, two organizations, right? These are quotes from people, actual people. And you're saying the organization, it's the same. I mean, the organizations are made of people. It's not some organization, it's people. So
organizations that have been here for hundreds of years that
I agree.
That have influence within outside of the community when they're dealing with government members, when they're dealing with universities, when they're dealing with any other non-Jewish entity. I think that's a difference that should be talked about a lot.
Okay, so the question is, we need to kind of start to wrap this up. So the question is, what would you do today, kind of coming even to this understanding that this might be one thing that we do have control over. We don't have control over the haters and all that. Yeah, you can continue to pour money into education and information, all that, fine, but we don't have direct control over them. We may have greater control over our own people, our own organizations. What would you do? What are you doing right now? Maybe that people can hear, can get inspired by, that you think can move the needle in the right direction.
Educate ourselves. I think that's one of the things that we lack as a community. We have taught a generation two things about Jewish history: the Holocaust and how everyone else oppresses us. To make proud Jews to fight anti-Semitism, you also educate them about proud moments of Jewish history, which I do. Like, the education that I have seen is, oh, we went through the Holocaust, we survived, we built Israel, and okay. But if you see, for example, Jews in the Caribbean during the Inquisition, they did not just say, you know what, we're just going to let them come find me. We fought. There were Jewish pirates in the Caribbean that attacked Spanish ships and said, this is revenge. We're not just coming after your gold. We're coming after you because you destroyed our community. There's history that needs to be taught. And when you apply that history today, I would argue it makes Jews who are proud, who are more willing to say, oh, look at these examples of Jews throughout history that actually united to fight a common enemy. That is what needs to happen today. And I feel that probably will never happen, even though I'm optimistic that it will. But I feel that we've lacked the ability to say that as Jews, we are a proud people. We have done things to survive among ourselves throughout history that has been ignored. And when you ignore that history, you allow the history of others to influence your history. And so I feel that's the first step, to fight that. And then we can go on and say, you know what? Anti-Semitism is scary, but at the end of the day, when we're united as a people, we can combat it effectively. But they need the lessons of it historically first to do it, because as we see it now, we're losing. It, it's a losing battle. It was when I was a university student. It is now with some university friends that I'm still in contact with, still there. Like, there needs to be something that builds a community.
What happens when these Jewish organizations get together in the same room?
Knives come out, Seth.
The knives come out. Exactly like you said. Like, I know that there is an ability to work together. It happens, but because there are egos, and yes, I will admit, it is a people thing. It's not an organization thing. It is a people thing. But they don't work. At least they claim they do, but me being a Jewish community member who has had to fight anti-Semitism on a campus where Jews are actually a minority, saying that, oh, we've worked together isn't enough for me. So how I see it, they don't work together. They don't know how to work together as a Jewish unity or organization that wants unity. They don't know how to do it. And that's a very sad thing.
I want to end with a nice picture, because I found that part as well. So Second Temple, I'm taking us back in time. Second Temple, that moment in time where Jews were just one big happy family, right? And Josephus Flavius Josephus, right? He writes in this book, The Antiquities of the Jews. He writes that the pilgrims to Jerusalem would make acquaintances maintained by conversing together and by seeing and talking with one another, and so renewing the recollections of this union, the union of the Jews. And once they entered Jerusalem, the pilgrims were greeted with open arms. The townsfolk let them into their homes and treated them as family. There was always room for everyone. And the Mishnah relishes this camaraderie, this rare camaraderie. And it says, all the craftsmen in Jerusalem would stand before them and ask about their well-being. Our brothers, men of so-and-so place, have you come in peace? And the flute would play before them until they arrived at Temple Mount. Additionally, all the material needs of every person who came to Jerusalem were met in full. One did not say to one's friend, I could not find an oven on which to roast offerings in Jerusalem, or I could not find a bed to sleep in Jerusalem. Even better, the unity and warmth among the Hebrews projected outward and became a role model for the neighboring nation. And the philosopher Philo of Alexandria portrayed the pilgrimage as a festival. Thousands of people from thousands of cities, some by land, some by sea, from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south, would come each festival to the temple as if to a common shelter, a safe haven protected from the storms of life. With hearts filled with good hopes, they would take this vital vacation with sanctity and with glory to God. Also, they make friendships with people they had not met before. And in the merging of the hearts, they would find the ultimate proof of unity.
Well,
It's a nice picture.
it is a nice picture. I wish it happened more often now in today's world. But yeah.
Let's make it happen, Tyler. You are in our circle. If you need an oven, I got an oven.
I got a flute.
I got a flute. Seth has a bed. We have friends in Toronto, by the way.
Okay.
So,
all right.
you know,
Okay.
we figured that
Our goal here is to build this network of Jews who are interested in finding some solution around this, and like Leo just said, we consider you part of our circle. Don't know how fast or how slow nature will let us do this, but our interest is to bring together Jews maybe even anti-Semites who are looking for a solution for this, and to find that common unity among all of us, as different as we are, and that in that unity, to project that unity out, to show that above all of our differences, something magical happens when we all come together.
I hope, because I feel that eventually things are going to get worse, especially in North America. And I feel that we have to be united, at least to deal with whatever's coming. And I just hope that there are Jews who realize this and who also want, you know what, let's just stop with this petty nonsense and just get on and be a Jewish community, be a loving Jewish community.
You know what it says here? Can you read? How's your Hebrew?
Not that great.
It says, Le'ov zekal, to love is easy.
I like that. Yeah, it is very easy.
It is easy. You know, it's easier than to hate. Well, there's some work involved, but you know, friends help. So, all right. Look, you're invited to Israel or to New Jersey, whatever comes first. We had a great time speaking with you. I wish more people would listen and would speak with such an open heart as you have. And I think if we just do that, then our opinions don't really matter as long as our hearts are in the right direction. And so we're really happy to have Tyler on the Jew Function Talks. Obviously, follow us, like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. And the only way to do this is education. And education starts with conversation. We have to do this together. That's the only chance we've got. So, from the Jew Function Talks, Seth, Tyler.
Thanks, Tyler.
Great to meet you. All the best.